Hey everyone, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, and publisher at Autonomy Global. We're in April, everybody, and it is a month we've dedicated to the theme of UTM and infrastructure, sponsored by Airspace Link. If you missed their show with Michael Helander, go back and check it out. But today we have another incredible company on the show, Speedbird Aero, and two of their leaders to talk about everything they're doing globally in this space, from drone delivery to UTM to infrastructure and everything in between. So it's so wonderful to have Manuel back on the show and Samuel on the show. So great to have you guys.
Hi, Don. Nice
Hi.
to be here.
Hello, Don. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Don, again for having us at Dawn of Autonomy. Thank you, Autonomy Global. It's a pleasure and honor again to be part of it.
Awesome, awesome. So, for those that have been following me for a while, you may have seen Speedbird a couple years ago on the show. Manuel, he was on our leadership podcast, The Full Tilt, doing great things. They've opened up a presence in Portugal, originally emanating out of Brazil. And now, everybody, drum roll, they're looking to go big in the United States. So we're super happy to have these guys on the show to catch everybody up on what they've been doing and where they've been. But before we do that, let's go ahead and have you guys introduce yourself. So, Manuel, why don't you introduce yourself first and tell everybody just a little bit about your personal background?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Manuel Coelho. I am the co-founder and CEO of Speedbird. I'm the business side of the company, right? So when we founded Speedbird in 2018, Samuel was the genius, the technologist, the futurist, looking at ahead. You know, he's been talking with me. We work together for a company in telemedicine for many years in Phoenix, Arizona. They were global leaders. And since the beginning, very early, he said, well, we should be using drones, right? So I'm just the part that puts all the glue together in terms of how we're going to pay for it, how we're going to sustain the company going, the business plan, the business model, how to monetize this and make this a sustainable business, not only for manufacturers, operators, but also for clients, right? So at the end of the day, someone is ordering something that's, whether it's medicines or even organ transplants and food delivery, they all have a cost, they all have a price. So therefore, to make this commercially viable is my crusade, right? So in that, Samuel.
Awesome. Yeah, over to you, Samuel.
Thanks again, Don. Thank you, Manuel. So my background is basically technology, software engineering, robotics. That's what I love to do. I love to design and develop, and I've been working with technology for the past 25 years already, and the telemedicine, that's when we saw the opportunity to bring drones to life and how to use it. And that's when I met Manoel. And so this partnership started back there when we were in Arizona. And here you have the two pillars of the company, myself leading the technology, and my partner and friend Manoel here leading the business side.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. And Manuel, I'm going to go back to you. Speedbird has been really on the front lines of drone delivery in Latin America for years. I remember one of the first times we talked, I feel like I interviewed you for Inside Unmanned Systems magazine and a piece we were doing on Latin American drone delivery. How did you first decide to build a company with Samuel around logistics and autonomy rather than just like one-off drone projects?
That's a great question, and this credit belongs to Samuel, right? He was the one that had the vision back in 2015. I'm sure he had the idea way before that, but he actually brought a drone to my house in Phoenix. We had a beautiful golf course right in front, so he was like flying, and showing to me how this technology would change the world, and I was like, yeah, okay, how to make money with this toy here, and it was a smaller drone, so it's like I really failed to see I love aviation. I worked for a telemedicine company that was, the founder was inducted out of the Hall of Fame of Aviation. John Garrett, my mentor, a lot of great people. There was telemedicine for aviation, so that's where the name Speedbird came from. It's British Airways for people who don't know, and the airways, right? They communicate, they identify themselves as Speedbird. I always loved the name because they were our biggest client at that time. But in any event, Samuel had the idea, right? And as we were deploying telemedicine to very remote areas of the world, that became apparent that telemedicine coupled with drone delivery, right, and logistics with drones was key because we had to transport patients, right? Think about it. I was in Cape Verde for 15 days. The telemedicine, the medical advice would arrive. We had very advanced machines. Right? You probably know, Don, because we served the VA for so long, right? So it was the first, because the VA had, obviously spread all over the country. And therefore, people, instead of actually leaving their cities to go to the major VA hospitals, they could go to a VA clinic and had a full consult, dermatology, audiology, multiple other disciplines in medicine that you could actually, be seen by a specialist without leaving your hometown. So the VA was actually the big springboard, and Samuel had the idea, said, look, we can do the same thing now. The medical advice already arrives at the location, but medicines, the prescriptions, the medical samples, right, the blood samples, you had to transport the patients to do it. So he actually brought this to me back in 2015, and only a few years later, that made sense when I was actually facing that harsh reality in the field. I said, well, we still have to transport patients. Okay, the impact of telemedicine was amazing, but just to let somebody know that you have a disease or anything that need to be treated, but it had to be actually relocated, and transported because you couldn't get the medicines, you couldn't get the right medical samples, etc. That was the key, and Samuel actually saw that before anyone that I met. I think it was only Zipline at that time doing this in Africa. He even brought it to me, so I thought it was quite ingenious, and he actually built his own drones. And to show it to me, he built the entire system and said, "This is what it looks like." But anyways,
it's a great segue. Let's just talk about that, Samuel, and bring it back over to you. I mean, I just actually read an article about chemotherapy patients that are in rural areas that sometimes have to drive hours and hours to receive treatment. And with some family experience recently in that space, like I can't even imagine having to drive hours and hours to and from such an appointment. So your vision is really life-changing for so many people. And then you built the drones. So we've covered the drones, but let's do the around the world here. I know it's like the DLV-1, the DLV-2. I think there's a 3. I know there's a 4. One's fixed wing. Walk us through kind of where you started and where you are today.
Yeah, it all started there in the telemedicine practice, Don, and I really was inspired by some stories I heard about, like American companies doing some very specific work in Africa for saving lives, actually, like transporting blood, vaccines, and that started to make sense when I was working with telemedicine, like Manoel said. So we were delivering the medical treatment remotely, right? But the patient needs to be transported to some places to get prescription and so on. So it really made sense at that time, and I always was an enthusiast on robotics and RC planes, RC cars, and so on. So when I saw that happening, and when, for example, Zipline was really small, just a group of people doing that, that was inspiring as well. And I just decided, well, I'll try to build a system that will just fill the gap on the telemedicine side, right? And then that all started. The software, that is my biggest background now. So the developing all the software, how it communicates, how the hardware will be controlled remotely, how these drones can transmit their position. So there was like a plethora of different technologies at that time. Today, it's still growing. Like have so many different technologies today. And then, well, looking at that opportunity, I built at least 2 drones. It was a big ones, but still prototypes. And the first flight happened in Scottsdale in Arizona. And Manoel knows the field there. So we were there like just trying to make the thing work, everything connected to the internet at that time. So the vision we see today, when people talk about beyond visual line of sight, BVLOS, we were doing back there like almost 10 years ago, trying to
Wow.
make it work. So I think all this vision and opportunity we saw in telemedicine, it made sense at that time, but now it makes even more sense to deploy this technology. So yeah, I'm really glad we made it here, and there's a lot to go still, but still we have a lot to do.
Well, you've
Yeah.
done a lot though, so you've moved well beyond prototype. If I recall correctly, and you guys, of course, will correct me if I'm wrong, the DLV1, DLV2, it stands for delivery 1 and 2. Those were quads, right?
They're
Quadcopters.
hexacopters.
What's that?
They are hexacopters.
Hexacopter. There you go. Hexacopters. Okay. Pretty large. And those were the first two, if again, memory serves, they were certified by the ANAC, ANAC, the Civil Aviation Authority in Brazil, for remote drone deliveries. And I know you guys have forged quite a strong alliance with iFood to deliver food. It's almost, for people in the United States, if you're not familiar with iFood, it's like the equivalent of the Brazilian Walmart, if you will, like the level and scope and scale of this company and what Manuel and Samuel have built over time. So those were the two first drones. Those were some of the things you were doing. Manuel, you've been the business side of this, growing this. um you expanded. I saw some UK work. I saw, Portugal headquarters. Walk us through that kind of history, if you will, up to where we are right now in terms of the DLV1, DLV2. I think a 3 and 4 came along, and all those different amazing things you guys have been doing in the past couple of years.
No, that's a great segue here to discuss this because I think as we go into the vision, what Samuel had since the beginning, what he didn't tell us that while we were working at the telemedicine company, Global Med was an amazing company. Joe Bartholomew was the CEO, founder. Actually, the manufacturing plant of the telemedicine carts and briefcases, there were telemedicine devices inside briefcases and telemedicine carts. They're spread all over the world. The manufacturing plant was inside the Scottsdale airport.
Mm,
And right by it, there was a drone company that built military drones for the US.
okay.
So Samuel probably spent more time. That's probably one of the reasons he decided to leave because he spent more time actually looking at the drones than actually building software for Global Med. Don't tell that to Joe. But in any event, he decided to leave to Brazil, and he was his decision in January 2018. He landed in Brazil with 2 drones that he built in Arizona. But since the beginning, right? And I worked obviously with aviation for so long. We had a lot of people from the aviation background, and Brazil has a history of aviation.
Course.
Because
Embraer.
exactly.
Yep.
And so and when Samuel brought this to me, the first thing we agreed on was this is not a toy. This is not the DJIs that you buy at Costco or, nothing wrong with them. They're amazing. But this has to be a certified aircraft. If you're going to be doing
Yeah.
BVLOS, flying over people, scaling this has to be integrated with the airspace. So back in 10 years ago, we already had that vision. So I said, we're going to go through all the harsh requirements to make this a certifiable aircraft systems, right? So Samuel, that was actually what he envisioned since the beginning. obviously the supply chain had not evolved, from engines to ESCs, and because we borrowed from obviously radio controlled aircraft in the beginning, right? So the industry is maturing. So we couldn't expect type certification right off the bat. We had to actually grow with it. So we had the vision for it since the beginning. I said, well, let's take this to ANAC, which people forget sometimes that ANAC is one of the founding members of ICAO, right?
Yeah, it's one of the big four. So
exactly.
the FAA, EASA, ANAC, and what's the fourth one?
I think Transport Canada, perhaps, or
yeah, Transport Canada.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It is TC. Yeah.
TC, right. So people forget sometimes, why did you go to Brazil? Because obviously Brazil, people don't know that 80% of the regional aircraft flights that they take in the US is Brazilian built aircraft, right? And not many people bring that up. And we were born in Brazil. Obviously, I grew up in Phoenix, right? Samuel actually lived there for 8 years. We worked together, but he had the vision. Said, look, here in the U.S., as you know very well, we've been trying to come back for years now. If you look at the early programs at Dawn of Autonomy, I said, look, we need to go back. We need to go back. But Part 108 wasn't part of it. It was a lot of waivers, very expensive. It was one-off every single time. I said, look, there's no scalability here. The bad part about Brazil is that money is very expensive, right? It's probably the highest interest rates in the world, right? For you to raise money, borrow money, why any venture capital company would invest in Brazil if you can just park your money in the bank? So that was the business side that was difficult, but the technology side in Brazil was actually the biggest surprise that I had. And Samuel was 100% right. We were embraced by the Brazilian Civil Aviation Authority. They were very harsh. They were very difficult, right? In terms of, okay, this needs to be, very robust for us to authorize. So it took us a long time working and improving, but we had a captive audience because we were the only ones. Nobody had actually, it was like an arbitrage move to go from the US where 5, 6 companies were at that time, even more, fighting for the FAA's attention. Everybody wanted waivers, right? And multiple waivers, and it was very expensive. We decided to take a different route and go to Brazil, where we had more attention. But then we said, okay, after 2 years, the flights were doing well. I mean, the systems were doing well. So let's put it to test, and let's take this abroad, right? Because even if we had the big brand of Brazilian aviation and Embraer, outside of Brazil, and not many people would be, very, even to own Brazilians, which is interesting, right? If you make it at home and you're not winning outside, they prefer to buy an aircraft from outside.
Interesting. Yeah.
We had to actually build our reputation. So we decided to go to Israel. You probably know our connection with our Israel.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we were invited to be part of the Israel National Drone Initiative. And that was actually a watershed moment for us, because we had to actually test our drones. And we've been there for 4 years with Highlander, with Can-Do, good relationships with Elsight, ParaZero, many companies that actually helped us build our technology deck. We developed things together and put it to test, and also to maintain the cost effectiveness of the solution, because at the end of the day, it's about dollars and cents in the delivery, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to scale. But anyways, that was the next step, was to go to Israel. And then the idea was to come back to the US after Israel, right? In 2022.
But unfortunately, we still weren't keeping up. And incredibly, as much as the Europeans look at the US and say, oh, look how far ahead of everything the US is in compared to us, they're kind of ahead of us in certain respects. So I know you guys opened up your headquarters in Portugal, and you've recently just gotten a groundbreaking approval from EASA. Tell everybody about that.
Correct. So in the Brazilian regulatory framework also was lagging behind. 2017 was really good when Samuel decided. So we've been putting pressure on them to also, and it has to go through the Congress, right? The Brazilian Congress, which now is being approved, kind of like Part 108. It's called RBAC 100, right? So going from 94. But it was taking a long time. So when we look at Europe, and we had actually our Chief Strategy Officer, Verusca Dias, which actually, she is Brazilian by birth, but she worked at Accenture in Germany. and she had a chance to evaluate Speedbird. We had interesting moments that we almost sold the company to other institutions that wanted to come because it was very difficult. Money ran out, right? Brazil is going through a very difficult time as well from a venture capital perspective. You probably remember Silicon Valley Bank going belly up
Yep.
back in 2022, 23. So we went through all that cycle. A lot of drone companies disappeared, a lot of startups disappeared. So this is when Veruska said, look, you should come to Europe. Europe has a very, very mature regulatory with obviously SORA, right? With all the what Jaros was doing. I'm part of Jaros. So she gave us and here you can actually look at fundraising as well, the companies, their VCs, the whole infrastructure. And by the way, Manuel, I'm a Portuguese citizen as well, American, Portuguese, and Brazilian. So therefore, my family is from Portugal. So she said, look, being a Portuguese citizen, you have history here, but also they have great companies like Take Ever. There was a big success story there. And therefore, Embraer also, when they went to Europe, they go through Portugal because of historical ties, the language. So whatever you did with ANAC in Brazil, it's also called ANAC in Portugal, right? The proximity. So it's going to be a lot easier to enter the European market through the Portuguese, which they're very advanced as well. I was very impressed with everything, the Portuguese ANAC is doing. But a long story short is that there was the obvious entrance as one of the 27 member states that you could actually gain the certifications first and then be able to not only, as a manufacturer, certify the aircraft. We did the first SAIL 3 according to the means of compliance of SORA 2.5, which is in IASA's level. So we certified in Portugal and in Italy first. The Italians actually did. We received the first SAIL 3 now in Italy. We're operating with Urban V, which is a good partner as well. We operate with Skyports as well in the UK. That was actually been our partner for since 2023 when we did the Royal Mail deployment in Scotland, and still going on. Actually, that's the fun part, Don. When we come here to say, look, what we started in the Orkney Islands, we fly daily today. We take people from Stromness to Roy and Grimsby, different islands connecting. So we're very proud to say, look, whatever we built is still working permanently to this day. So that's obviously a big kudos to Skyports, big kudos to Urban V. This is where perhaps we will talk about not only the integration of airspace, but also the infrastructure, right? Because Skyports and Urban V are infrastructure companies, right? With vertiports. So you can see how it comes full circle. We manufacture the aircraft, the systems that control the UAS, right? That sustain the BVLOS nature of our operation, because that's the scalable part. But also you depend on the integration of the airspace. You depend on the infrastructure that's being built for you to be successful.
Well, that is a perfect background, I think, to bridge into infrastructure. So Samuel, tell us about that. I mean, you're working with a number of Israeli companies that had their own UTM, UAS traffic management. Obviously, when you're doing drone logistics, to the extent you guys are doing, like the Orkney Islands, you're flying over water, there's other aircraft around, over time, I believe you guys developed your own UTM, almost by software as your background, part of your background. Tell us about that evolution and kind of the UTM that's part and parcel of now your whole package.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting to evaluate and also bring some insights down. If you look at the history where we start and where we are today, I think one of the uniqueness of Speedbird is that we navigated in ANAC regulatory environment, then EASA regulatory environment, right? Now we have the Part 108 coming, and you see kind of a harmonization happening, so that the rules seems to be very similar now in all these agencies, and they must be if you want to scale globally, they must be.
Yes.
And Speedbird now, we had all these experiences, right? Even when we went to Israel, was there with Manoel, and we saw how they were doing, and it's all similar, right? I think this experience gave Speedbird this unique knowledge on the regulatory frameworks and how we can tweak the system, tweak the technologies to match the safety or the safeguards as well they require to operate. And when we talk about UTM, it's all about that. You have to find a way, to manage multiple drones, multiple flights, how you deconflict things. And it's not just one system. When you talk about UTM, you are talking about like several different systems that work together. So
Yep.
like you said, if we are flying over water in the Orkney Islands, for instance, we must have some provider that would give us a very accurate weather information, like wind, direction, temperature, humidity. So how we get that? So we need different providers that will take part on this whole UTM ecosystem. So the same goes to remote ID when you talk about how I identify other drones, or how these drones will talk to each other, right? How they will navigate in the same airspace without any collision problem. So it's a bunch of different services that works together, and that we were very, I wouldn't say lucky, but it was an opportunity that we took at the time to experiment all these and have this knowledge to understand how it works. But the good news, in my opinion, is that most of services are now in place when you talk about registration, when you register the aircraft, when you have the flight authorization. So if you look at the US, when they implemented the low altitude authorization,
Yeah, the
the
Lance.
SMS message, that was amazing, right? So we have an SMS message, and then you can just, okay, I am authorized, I can fly. Perfect. So it's all part of the evolution. And so these systems, they are in place already, but it still needs a direction. So that's when part 108 comes to the scene to say, hey guys, so here's the picture, let's paint this, let's make the frame beautiful. And I think that there will be always room for, improvement. But we didn't have this 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's not just part 108, right? It's part 146, which is the UTM piece of this, which is, Europe has USpace, and they've had that for years. I know it's been maybe slow going at the nation state level, if you will, across Europe at different, levels. But so it sounds like, and let's help the audience understand what you guys bring to the fight. So you've got these amazing drones, and we haven't even talked about all of them, but we have before, everybody. So go back and do a search of Speedbird Aero on Autonomy Global or on Autonomy Global Network, and you'll find lots of information and pictures of these drones that Samuel has developed over time. But it sounds like, Manuel mentioned Urban V, Skyports, you mentioned weather, you mentioned some of these, let's call them supplemental data service providers, SDSPs, or, UAS service suppliers, USSs across the board. It sounds like you guys can agnostically integrate things into your technology stack. And you do it through, some kind of an IT interface, Samuel. I assume you created that. So are you able, does it have a name, and like, or you just call it Speedbird UTM? And, in terms of the people listening out there, what kind of partners or stakeholders are you still looking for on the UTM side?
Manuel?
Well, yes, I can answer that. From very early, we understood cooperation is key, right? When we work with Israel, we work with obviously our major partners, Highlander and Kendu, but
Yep.
we also work with other providers, right? UTM providers, and they all work interoperable. They're all interoperable. They all
Yep.
communicate with each other, right? That's the whole premise of the UTM's services, and it was quite amazing to see.
Yep.
When we went to Singapore as well, just to give you an idea what Samuel did, we have our software that controls our aircraft systems. That's the beauty, whether you're talking about the LV1, the LV2, the LV3, 4, first of all, these are all robust aircraft that actually been to, severe, testing to ensure that it can actually deliver, right? Okay,
Yep.
okay, number one. So the civil aviation authorities can trust that that's actually a robust aircraft that can be in Sail 3 and even, moving up now to Sail 4 in the future. The architecture that was done from a hardware perspective and software perspective can actually withstand. But more importantly is the systems in there are all interoperable, right? So you have the APIs that can connect with other UTM providers, right? Also, for example, as you mentioned, you work with iFood, which is a food delivery company in Brazil. They do 190 million deliveries a month, right? So
Wow.
we need to interoperate with them, right? So they have the softwares as well. So it's not only to the UTM providers but also our customers and partners. So they have to see what the aircraft is. The logistics have to be. So that's what Samuel is an expert in the software stack specifically, right? So where all of these service providers can come in and also clients to make sure that we have a cohesive ecosystem. I'll give a great example. With Skyport operates in Singapore. We've been doing ship to shore, which is one of the most amazing operations, right? Food delivery is great because of a lot of pressure, SLAs, but ship to shore is 24 hours. It's at night, during the day, in one of the busiest ports, actually the second busiest port in the world, where one of the busiest airports in the world, which is Changi, right? In a small island. So you have to have not only in the Speedbird software, we have the connections with the traffic of ships, marine traffic. It's integrated. So you can see all the ships because random ships are calling us and Skyport's operating, right? They say, look, we need to receive cash. We need to receive, samples or whatever.
Yeah.
And as a random ship coming to port will be at, Anchorage. And we have to minimize two things that are important. Minimize ground risk first,
Yeah.
right? So you fly around the ships, the dynamic routing that Samuel has built based on the real location of the ships, right? So he reduced it to a few seconds. So we get real-time data on the ships. So that reduces the ground risk. And then you have the air risk with Changi Airport, where we are connected to one of the UTM providers that Skyport selected. So the software for the aircraft systems, you have to be configured in a way that it can support not only these type of integrations, but also with micro weather and other things that, jamming. For example, if you work in Israel, you see jamming and spoofing every week, right?
Sure. Every day.
It's part of the regular daily activity. And for us, this was amazing to see. We could only simulate in the past. In Israel, we could actually live this and make our solutions more robust, right? With
Wow.
vision flying. And so, anyways, that's how, what Samuel has built was something that, look, with experience in every location that we operate.
And Manuel, just a parenthesis here, maybe to help the audience to understand more about the software side. So people are used to having that, RC remote control with a screen, with a software there. So that's how they use drones today, like most of people, right? Most of people have the drone, the remote, the screen, the software, it's in there. But what we're talking about here is it's a complete platform, software platform. So it's not just a ground control station. It's the platform where you connect all these other services. You connect to, CAAs, APIs, or whatever. So we have many different providers of information that we use this Speedbird platform to organize and orchestrate all the information for our operators. So that's how we plan, and then that's how we deploy the operation, following carefully the regulation, depending on the country, the instance that we are located.
So I remember seeing your remote operations center, Manuel. You gave us a tour at some point of this thing. Really cool. You know, where you're in Brazil, where you're not only manufacturing drones, but also remotely operating the vehicles in that country. So do you remotely operate like vehicles in the UK or Israel or Portugal or Singapore from there, or do you have other rocks, let's call them remote operation centers, globally as well?
Other rocks, right? So depending on the regulatory, right?
Yeah,
Brazil is a big country, 8.5 million square meters, right?
yeah,
Kilometers, sorry, square kilometers. So it's the size of the US when it comes to the territorial mass from the continental US, just to give people an idea. We
yes,
have one center in Brazil, one center that is local where we can operate. We have emergency centers in case, for example, there's a flood or anything that we can actually, go from there. But more importantly is all the pilots are sitting in the same location, right? So they're taking food delivery, then they go to a medical delivery, then they go to a ship to shore, they go to cable vessel mooring. We have multiple operations. Uh,
wow,
that the same pilots sitting in the same center, focused and away from the theater of war. Let's put it this way, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
if
yeah,
about we work in telemedicine for trauma, also with U.S. Army and others, so we understand quite well the importance of having the roles. You know very well in aviation, pilot and co-pilot, right? Who is the pilot in command? Who's communicating, and who is actually, flying the aircraft and navigating. So
yeah,
that's important to have the roles because look, in food delivery where SLAs are very tight, you have a lot of pressure. So we've been doing food delivery in the same location for over 6 years. It's the oldest food delivery route in the world, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, right? And we learned a lot from it because in the beginning we had pilots, even though they're flying BVLOS, but they were sitting in a container inside the shopping mall, right? Looking, for example, putting the battery, the box will come, they will do it. We have staff doing this, but they were there with the whole operations, right? So
yeah,
if there was a hamburger that came and wasn't as hot, or there was a drink, there was spillage, the pilot will be susceptible to all these pressures, right? Okay, they have to fly now, whatever it's happening. And today we learned after 2 years flying that way, right, with people locally, that removing the pilot from that location
yeah,
actually created a safety culture that was paramount to our
wow,
operations. Because regardless of what's happening, the
yeah,
pilot is focused on flying or monitoring. It's a pilot, it's a human in the loop, right?
yeah,
It is autonomous. It is pretty much fully autonomous, other than we don't have yet the auto charge for the batteries yet. The containers that will fly. In the future, that will be built as well. We just felt it was too early to automate everything. It will be too expensive at this moment. Uh,
yeah,
but the fact is, having the pilot sitting in a central location, being able to control and focus on the flying side of the aircraft, like make sure that everything is operating and not being exposed to the pressures of food delivery, e-commerce.
yeah, or whatever. I mean, just
Yeah,
the
it,
distractions,
it
right?
helps tremendously.
Yeah,
And also think about, we do already offshore, right? Oil rigs. Imagine if you had to have a pilot sitting in the oil rig.
yeah,
So
it's just
BVLOS
not.
is the only way to make this commercially viable.
No, I love that. So I want you mentioned drone in a box, right? Like not there yet, but you're using some kind of a drone port or drone launch pad. Samuel, can you describe what first of all, I don't even know that anybody, frankly, has defined the term drone port yet. And I've seen some live operations everywhere from throwing down a mat in a parking lot to maybe a an elaborate like cherry picker like box that like goes up in the sky so the pilot can still see things, but the drone is launching from the ground. What are you guys using in terms of infrastructure for kind of that drone port, air quotes here, before like you might get to a more autonomous box type solution?
Yes. So that's interesting, because we discussed this with the regulators as well.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, we had to, and it's good to see their vision about how the operation should be, and then we have our vision. Then we discuss the best way, but that always come to safety first.
Oh yeah.
So we are always thinking about it has to be, you know, a location where if it's not elevated, you will have fences, so only personal allowed personnel to enter there. So we have locations where we take off from the ground, but it's fenced. We have fences, and we have operations that we take off and land on top of a container, for example. So a drone port in our vision is I can use an analogy like a heliport or an airport. So it's a very sensible, it has to be a safe location, you know. We take off from there, we land there. So there's procedures. People, when they get the package to deliver, to insert in the drone in the bag. So we have procedures for that, have checklists, and all I can say is that it has to be very similar to what an airports look like. So it's another scale. It's not, of course, a huge airport, but
Right.
if you think about the idea, when from where you take off and then you go and fly and where you want to land, it has to be safe locations, and that's our vision. That's how we are doing today.
And
Yeah.
for many years, Don, we perfected the landing right on in specific areas in the city, and then that would have done 90% of the route, right? Now we have the winch as well. So the same aircraft, you can have the winch or landing. There are advantages to both, right? Winch is for areas where it's hard to reach, or let's say you're in a busy, part of the city that you don't have the ability to land, and you can winch in that, or in the ship, for example, ship to shore or platforms that you don't want to land, you just drop the cargo and come back. But also perfecting that, either with a winch or landing, you can drop this in a locker. Okay. You can drop this into, a specific location in the city that people can pick it up, etc. And now we're going to even, discussing, being able to actually do this in people's backyards, depending on, in a gated community that, we can guarantee that you're going to have a little bit more control, of the elements that people are not going to run into picking up the cargo, or like it's being done in the US in the suburbs, right? Not in downtown Phoenix, but in the suburbs here, with other companies that are doing it quite well in Ireland, etc. We've seen the operations and it's brilliant. But we want to make sure that we can have the solutions for any type of city, because, for example, in Brazil, where we operate as well the aircraft, or in Portugal, you don't have the same backyard. So it's going to be impossible to drop something in a high rise with a drone. So our job is to create these lockers in the strategic areas inside these communities, that they are always a few, yards away from the drone port that is authorized and safe for the drones to operate from and to.
Yeah, that is so interesting. When you think about infrastructure, the digital piece of this is so hugely important, and all the APIs, Samuel, that you've created to, integrate with all different kinds of other technologies to make this ecosystem for the logistics. In terms of physical infrastructure, minimal investment, it seems like needed, just something to make the landing, takeoff areas safe, so that people that aren't part of the operation don't get involved in it, or can't mess with it. Man, we are like 1 minute left, which is crazy. And I knew our time would fly. I no pun intended. What I want to do is reserve this last minute and give you guys each, your 30 seconds of fame, if you will, at the end here. Tell us what's next for you. Let's go with Samuel first, and then Manuel, and then let's end with how people can learn more about Speedbird and where they can find you next. So Samuel, go ahead, over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here with you, with Manoel, talking about drones and all this marvels we are doing. So what's coming next? Well, I don't know if I can say.
Well, you can't give us state secrets, but is there any general thing you can say without naming names?
Yeah, well, I think that we need to push for Part 108, honestly, because that will allow us to scale. I think the drone industry will be now in that gold era people were expecting and waiting for.
Yes.
So that's what I really would like to see happening as soon as possible, and we want to be there. We want to be the one of the players, maybe the best one, hopefully, but we want to be there, and we are developing the technology for it. We have different drones from different purposes, different missions, and all the regulatory knowledge that we experienced, it's helping shaping that future. So I think what's ahead, it's very nice, and I am excited.
Awesome. Thank you, Manuel.
Well, we have a lot of work to do before we can really establish the first, manufacturing plant here in the U.S., right? I'm in Phoenix, Arizona right now, hometown, talking and being able to negotiate our, arrival here in the U.S. Back, right? Coming full circle from where we started in 2018, coming back, to the U.S. I think it's inevitable. No one makes a plan, to work so hard on the certification if you're not gonna, take the biggest markets, right? So US, Brazil, Europe, if you think about the what we followed, the harsh path to get to a robust systems is to work on the best areas, right? We have actually the biggest needs. So, for example, Brazil and the US being continental size, very complex in terms of logistics and the volumes, right? Europe a little bit less. They're smaller. They're more, for example, the logistics are much more optimized, right, with rail and other forms. But nonetheless, they still have a lot of needs that we are discovering and working. So we're very excited because Europe gives us the credibility of working with perhaps the toughest and the most well-established regulatory framework. So if we can regulate, if we can actually certify the aircraft to that level in Europe, right, that means that you have the credibility. Brazil and the US is giving us the volumes and also the excitement of something that it's coming next. So for us, is we done already the volumes in Brazil, working very hard with the top companies in the country. We done our credibility in Europe. Now it's the time to join our amazing cohort of companies that are redefining how the drone delivery space is actually run around the world, whether they come from Europe, they come from Israel, they come from the US, they're operating globally. If you look at what the other companies are doing, then you probably know who they are.
Yep.
They're all operated outside the US at some point, coming in and out to gain the experience. That's exactly what Speedbird does. The only advantage that we have today is the fact that we can do this at a cost per unit, per flight, per delivery, that perhaps just like Embraer, if you look at the regional aircraft, et cetera, it's cost effective. And we want to keep it that way. We want to make sure that we're not putting, and that's one of the reasons we haven't landed in the US yet, because we're waiting for clarity. Part 108, right?
Yeah.
As you mentioned, with the UTM now. And so I think it's the right time for us to do it. And we're very excited about the next steps of the company, doing this pragmatically. We're not overexcited about anything. We're doing this pragmatically. This is aviation. It takes time, it takes investment, it takes patience, and we are patient to make sure that when we land here in this year, hopefully 2026, we're going to start with the right partnerships, because nobody does things alone. And as Samuel mentioned, we cannot mention that we have a lot of exciting things happening in the US as well, where our aircraft systems will be flying in very visible areas. We're already done, Chicago, we've done Great Lakes, very
To
successful.
Detroit. And that's a great
Yeah.
way. I mean, I know we're at time here, and I want to just say, everybody, you can see at least Manuel and Elisa running around Exponential in May, in Detroit. So they're going to be two of our Law Tech Connect scholars attending that as well. So you get to meet him and come to our Law Tech Connect networking happy hour Wednesday night. Sign up for that, register separately. You can find all this on the Autonomy Global website under the events tab. And I'm so looking forward to seeing you again in person, Manuel. It's been a while. I think what you've done is incredible. We really just flew around the world with Speedbird just now in the last 45 minutes, and just really looking forward to seeing, what comes next for you. You've done amazing things all around the world. So much looking forward to seeing this happen in the United States as well. And fun fact, Michael Helander told us last week that the FAA has finished the Part 108 146 that is at the Department of Transportation, and it's making its way to the Office of Management and Budget. So we're hoping this summer we get, a published rule. So more to follow. Your timing is perfect. Thank you guys so much for joining us again on the show, getting us up to speed on everything with Speedbird Aero. And for everybody else out there that watched, thank you so much. Reach out to these guys. They're looking for partners. So for now, that is all she wrote. We are out of here.